Good morning. Oh, that's great. We are so happy to be here today and so happy to see you all after this winter storm we've had over the last day and a half. Welcome to Women Preventing Violent Extremism, Charting a New Course. On behalf of the Institute, we want to welcome you all to our headquarters. Whether you are more than one of 300 people who registered for the event or are joining us via our webcast, we are very glad that you're part of our discussion. My name is Kathleen Keenest. I direct the Gender and Peace Building Center here at the U.S. Institute of Peace. USIP is an independent, nonpartisan institution established 30 years ago by the U.S. Congress to increase the nation's capacity to prevent violent extremism and to prevent violent conflict. Although we sit here today in a building dedicated to peace building, we stand ready and are in endangered zones every day around the world to support non-violent approaches to resolving conflict. And thus this event today is especially relevant to USIP's mission. We are also here today in celebration of the International Women's Day on March 8th. And therefore we feel very, very honored to have with us today women leaders from India, Indonesia, Kenya, Nigeria, Pakistan, and Tanzania for a discussion on innovative approaches of how women are working to prevent violent extremism in their communities and countries. We will have two panels that will focus on these very different types of approaches. We plan to engage you, the audience, so please have your questions ready. We know that the international attention to the role of women in preventing and countering violent extremism is encouraging. Just 2 weeks ago, the White House Summit on Countering Violent Extremism took place here in Washington, and today we will reflect on those lessons from the meeting. We believe that perspectives from community-led initiatives like the ones you will hear today have much to contribute to the broader global agenda. So today's event will focus on the question of why gender matters. With the understanding, when we use the word gender, we don't mean only women, but inclusive of men and others, an analytical approach that helps us sort out the dynamics of gender relationships. You will hear about how engaging their communities, these women today have found innovative solutions toward the prevention of violent extremism. And in light of International Women's Day, we reflect on the fact that every day women around the world are on the front lines of war and violence, but they are also paving the way for peace in their communities. Today we have come to hear these stories because they teach us. They teach us that we are not alone, that together we inspire one another to stand up for human dignity, and their stories remind us again that most leaders are not born, but instead they emerge from tough challenges that they face in their everyday lives. They transform this hardship and harsh realities into an imagination to put forth something new, something bold to improve the lives of others. This is resilience, and moreover, their stories help us demystify the human force of resilience and recognize it in the human face of women. So again, I want to welcome you all today. We look forward to this engagement with you, and now I'm going to shift roles and introduce you to our first panel today. Thank you very much for coming. Our first panel today will focus on a pilot project called Sisters Against Violent Extremism, otherwise known as SAVE. You have their complete biographies in your packet, but I want to briefly introduce you to 5 of the leaders. There are many more around the world and many in this audience, but I want to note who they are here before we begin our discussion. First, I want to introduce you to Dr. Edith Schlaffer from Austria. She is the visionary and founder of Women Without Borders, and she has led the Sisters Against Violent Extremism project. Next to her is Farah Cicit, researcher, activist on women education and religion from Indonesia. Alia Bashir is an independent journalist based in New Delhi and is from Kashmir. Tasneem Amar, director of Yuke's Research and Publication Center on Women and Media in India. And Archana Kapoor.
In Pakistan.
In Pakistan. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No,
We're talking about this. And Archana Kapoor from India, founder of Seeking Modern Applications for Real Transformation, and the appropriate acronym there is SMART. So, Edith, help us set the context for the SAVE pilot project and what inspired you?
I think we have a huge inspiration currently going on, actually, from the White House summit. But what encouraged me was I've worked with women leaders since many years. Women Without Borders was started 14 years ago when we saw all the attacks, the insecurity, and actually the void that was there from civil society, that civil society was not appropriately addressed by security stakeholders. I felt we have to, with the competence and confidence of women, we have to establish a sustainable security platform. We have to be part of a new security architecture, and we identified clearly the missing building block, which is women. And recently, I was part of this. I could attend. I had the privilege to be at the White House summit here in Washington. It was a beautiful moment because for the first time ever, and I think this is a true breakthrough, we had the 65 country representatives alongside civil society in one room at equal footing. And the theme was prevention. This, I think, is a game changer. This is a whole new era, and I think we have to play on this new playing field. We have already started with the leaders who are sitting here, with my sisters from diverse countries, all targeted by violent extremism. We looked towards mothers. We looked towards bottom-up security, because we all know that that the wars have not led to the intended results. So we have to include civil society, and the families and mothers are in the heart of civil society. So we created a model, the so-called mother school model. We have to look at strategies, at solutions, at models. We bring now, with trained local community trainers, mothers together who are concerned that their children might be drawn into radical networks. They will follow the lure of violent extremism. We have to confront the ideas, the ideologies, and the emotions of the recruiters and the ideologists. This is so important. This is our challenge. And mothers are best placed if they have the right skills, if they have the confidence to stand up, if they break through the isolation, the shame, if something like that is going on in the family, and get the appropriate support. And I just mentioned briefly, I don't want to talk too long, but what was also called upon on the summit, research. We have to do new ways of research. We have to create research projects which are applied research projects, which already have in mind the implementations of potential solutions. We did so. Before we created the mother school model, which definitely did not fall from the skies, we did a huge research undertaking. We surveyed the voices of 1,000 mothers in countries targeted by violent extremism on a daily basis. And the outcome of these mothers of sons between 12 and 25. We were looking at this very volatile area of this small window of opportunity of adolescents and young adult boys. And we looked at 3 areas: the fears of the mothers, their fears, their concerns, their needs, and their expectations, and their trust. Fear, need, and trust. Number 1, the data speaks a clear language. We all have to learn from it. And this is the first ever a really unique study addressing the mothers. They fear that they cannot contain the threat if they're isolated, if they don't have a platform. With the mother schools, we have institutionalized a space, kind of an informal meetings of like-minded mothers. They look for like-minded mothers where they can openly share their concerns, address the recruitment issues. What do they need? They need a platform where they can meet. They have to come over the barrier that they can't trust people outside of the inner circle of the family. The first outside source are teachers. This we have to know. We have to bridge the gap between the families and the schools, because the schools address these children. This is the only common space where they meet all the time. And we have to bring in the mothers into the schools as well. So we're moving forward into this direction. The lowest trust scores have, unfortunately, the governments, international institutions, and also sometimes lower than we expected, religious leaders, because the mothers are realistic. They see that the recruitment is going on around mosques, around violent extremist ideologies, also distributed by religious leaders.
Thanks, Edith, for setting up just the 30,000-foot level, and it's very helpful to understand where it came from, what you were thinking. I'm going to turn to Tasneem in Pakistan. Tell us, the last 3 months have been difficult, we know, since December 16th. Help us understand what's been going on and how the mother schools can make a difference.
I think most of us know about December 16 when in a school in Peshawar, the Army Public School was attacked, and it killed almost 156 people, and out of those, 136 were children. I think that was probably the most traumatic experience in our history of violence that we've seen in the past 2 decades. We have seen mosques being bombed, we have seen public places being bombed, all of those has been happening. But that particular incident actually has brought together the civil society, the different people from different sects together, and there has been a public denouncing of the incident. There have been apologists as well from the other side who have said that children should not have been targeted. That alone brings it to the point that mothers matter, because it was the mothers who lost their sons, who lost their children, and it is the mothers whose sons actually attacked that schools. So the need for mother school in Pakistan is a huge need, I would say. We piloted 5 different schools in the areas around the capital of Islamabad and Rawalpindi. We chose the areas because we have Christian community living there, we have sectarian violence happening there, we have ethnic problems there, and we have religious fundamentalism going on. We have different kind of mosques preaching different things. So the lessons learned from those mothers' school was that these modules actually give strength to mothers. These modules give a voice to the mothers and the ability to be able to talk to the sons, the ability to be able to gauge any kind of difference in the behavior, to gauge whether they are more aloof or they are more aggressive. Previously they did not really pay much attention to the sons, because coming from where I come from in Pakistan, the focus is more on protecting girls, the focus is more on what the girls are doing. The honor is always associated with the girls and the upbringing. So the boys generally go scot-free. And even if they do something, it's always, even if they commit a crime like rape, they always say, oh, he was a young boy and it just happened. So they sort of try to justify these issues. But particularly after the attack on the Army Public School, we have come together, the civil society has come together very strongly, so much so that on every 16th of each month, we have a vigil in all the cities. And there is a saying now, there is a catch line that we have come up with, never to forget and never to forgive, which is that, we will keep remembering what happened on December 16 and come up with the strategies to counter this kind of violent extremism. And I think mothers are best placed to be able to help us counter extremism.
Thanks, Tasneem. We're going to move to Indonesia and look at how do these mother schools actually work? Yes. Indonesia is a massive country, massive population. What does it look like at the village level? Can you help us really look at the modules? What happens on a day-to-day basis? Give us a little bit more of an understanding.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Good morning, everybody. I come from Indonesia, the biggest Muslim country in the world, with more than 200 million Muslim populations. I live in Ledombo, Jember, East Java district, East Java province, with the big tension in Sunni and Shi'i conflict. Radical groups like the Indonesian Islamic State, also Hizbut Tahrir International, and ISIS. The Ledombo sub-district is a marginal area, poor, crimes, high early marriages and divorce, violence against women, and sexual trafficking. In my village, Ledombo is stigmatized as a backward village, and people believe it can't change its destiny. Ledombo was the presence of the bad local government apparatus. If the local government have a naughty apparatus, they will send it to Ledombo. It's like a person poor and many crimes there. So Ledombo, it's a sending area of migrant worker, forced migration. Many people, teenagers and mainly adults, especially women, go to another places, big cities and abroad, especially to Saudi Arabia and Malaysia, to earn money and escape from domestic violence. Social orphans, quote unquote, is a big problem. Women left and they left their kids. And there is no attention, very little attention in this social order. In that fragile environment like Ledombo, it's potentially door for crime, sexual trafficking, narcotic abuse, and also radicalism based on religion. Prevention is very important. And although Islam is the majority, I should share to you, but Indonesia is not a country that's based on Islam. Mainstream Islam is moderate, same as Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, Confucius, and various local religion. But harmony does not always go smoothly. Violence happen in some parts of Indonesia, Bali bombing, serial bombing in Jakarta, and many parts of Indonesia, and Maluku in Poso, in Sulawesi Island. It hurt Indonesia. It hurt family. They are also looking for followers, the radicalists, especially among the younger generation. They brainwash them, symbol place of worship, and also embassies, also NGOs, liberals NGO. Another perpetrators become antisocial and anti-family. They overlap to their new master. Yeah, the radicalists. Parents lost their boys and girls. Wife lost the husband. Children lost their father. Mostly Muslim organizations don't justify such an action. Interreligious groups, the government, including the Ministry of Religion, and various social organizations and politics, work hard to counter radicalization. Its conduct, government and TSO, educational institutions, schools, mosques, preacher organization, media, and CSO. But for many years, the problems considered as a social problem that handling as a social politic matter only. It less concept to private issue. Treatment intervention has not been adequately achieved domestic sphere. Many of the stories that describe the destruction of family, whose son recruited by radical groups, and not enough serious effort to overcome it. Very rare people thinking about family-based prevention. I'm grateful had a chance to do a variety of research ranging from the boarding school, which is considered the most radical in Indonesia, and senior high school public government that has been infiltrated by radical movement in 2 cities, big cities in Indonesia. Here from family, especially the mother, classic fear of radicalism, the capture more sophisticated, but family, especially parents, do not know to overcome. Mother school, parenting for peace came to fill the space anticipated. CVA, counter violence, extremism from family, with the cutting edge of women, the mother. In Indonesia, we were doing mother school in 2014, worked together with Women Without Borders and with patient mother who studied for 10 seasons, 5 points of the city, sub-district, and the village, representative of Muslim women organizations, churches, community, teachers, preachers, universities, lecturer, rural women, army's wife, and also mother whose son enter radical groups.
Thank you, Chick. We're gonna we'll keep coming back because we're gonna go around one more time, and then you can tell us what happened in those modules that you worked on.
Okay.
Archana, you have led a community radio station for the last 5 years called Mothers on Air. It's a great title. Gives women and mothers, particular, to learn an opportunity to learn from each other by sharing their own best practices on how to tackle extremism at the home and in the neighborhood. Can you help us understand more about your work, what you're doing, and even give us a story of one of those radio programs so we feel what it's like on a day-to-day level?
Sure. Thank you, Kathleen, for having me here. I run an NGO called SMART in a place which is very close to the capital of India, Delhi. It's just 70 kilometers away. But it's a very marginalized and isolated community. It's a 1.2 million population, which must be sounding quite astounding to all of you. But then we are 1.2 billion people. So it's just 1.2 million people there. And the community is very unique in its own way because I still feel that there's a bit of an identity crisis because several times they've changed their religion from Hinduism to Islam and then again Islam, and then they finally adopted Islam. And unfortunately in the 70s it became a very fundamentalist kind of Islam which they are now following. And they take refuge in the religion for everything which goes wrong. So obviously it's a wrong interpretation. But I have been working there for 14 years, and we've been working with women, but talking about empowerment without actually coming with some doables or something. We sometimes think that if we give them economic empowerment, then we will be able to include them into the whole decision-making structure and everything. But we felt that the voices of the women were still not heard. And it's about 3 years back that we started thinking about with Edith. And we started our first mother school in 2013. And the response was amazing. It was amazing because for the first time, we were able to create a platform for women to come, share, talk, speak, hear, and without fear. I think the whole concept of mother school is about building trust. It's not only about building a network, but it's about trusting each other. And I think that once a woman, and I'm so happy to see so many women here in the audience, because after all, we are 50% of the world's population, and we just don't get our space. So at least we were able to create this little space for the mothers to come and share without fear. And it's a process. You know, the module is very beautiful designed. It's got 10 modules in this manual, and it's all about understanding yourself. Who am I? What can I do? What is my strength? How does my confidence level increase? It's all about self-esteem. And when you believe in yourself, I think that's the first step towards any kind of change. But coming back to what Kathleen asked me, because we do these mother schools in very small groups. So in the first phase, we ran 10 mother schools, and we were targeting a group of 25 women in each of these groups. So it's just 250 women. Of course, the multiplier effect is such that you go back and you talk to your neighbor about what you're doing, you talk to your husband about what you did, and we do involve the men, because in the community where I work, the women would not come to the center if the men would not allow. I'm sorry, but that is how it exists, that they have to first finish all their household chores, they have to find those 2 hours for themselves, walk up to the center, spend those 2.5 hours, and then go back and share with the family, and especially the boys. And it's had a huge impact, because it's not only one woman, ultimately it's one family, it's the neighbor, it's the community, and we have sensed the change. Then we realized that how do we amplify these voices? So we decided, because I run a community radio station there, it's called Radio Mewat. Mewat is the district where I work. And we call it's Mothers on Air. And then again, the women came up, they said, Mothers on Air is fine, but why don't you give it a name? So we called it Kahi Unkahi. That is what you have said and what is left unsaid. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of things which they don't get a platform to speak about, which they speak on this program. And through this program, we reach out to about 100,000 women. And the impact is so good because, first of all, the women are assured that when they make a call, we have a program where we have the voices, and then we have a 15-minute segment for phone-ins. But they are assured that the person on the other hand is a woman. If it was a man speaking on the other hand, maybe we wouldn't get so many calls. So again, there is this trust factor that they're talking to women. And then they call, and one story which I would really like to share is that in where I work, in one of the villages, 2 of the religious leaders, as Edith and Chichek and Tasneem have talked, 2 of the religious leaders are already in jail for their connections with a group. And one mother called us up, and after this incident happened and the police rounded them up, and they are still in jail, and always it is like, we have been wrongly implicated and we didn't do anything, and why is the state against us? But then one mother called us up and she said that I'm really afraid because I think that my son was also meeting these people in the mosque a lot. But I'm so scared of speaking out because I'm afraid that maybe, he'll also be picked up. And we told her that, why don't you speak in your mother's school? Because we didn't want to make it an issue that the police comes in. And one thing I must share with you before I move on is that this is a community radio. It reaches only to the community. It's not like, broadcasting across the country. So it reaches to the community. We speak in the local dialect. We talk about the local concerns, local issues, local solutions. And then, our reporter was sensitized, and she went and she spoke with them. And then, we said, why don't we talk to your son? So the mothers, they spoke with the son, and they spoke with not one son, but several sons. And they started talking to them. And, it was all about dialogue between the mother and the child. And I think what Mother School has been able to do is that provide the space for communication, provide this space for strengthening the lines of communication, negotiation, dialogue, and our radio has been able to amplify the balanced voices. It's not that we don't give space to the alternate voice, but we try our best to stick to the balanced and more coherent and tolerant voices through our radio. And it's all about learning to accept the differences and then working to change these differences into mainstreaming them and looking at inclusion rather than exclusion, looking at working with them rather than isolating them or targeting them and showing them the path. And there are many instances such, because we've been doing this now for almost a year, so we can talk
Absolutely.
at some
We're
other
going to open it up
platform.
soon. But we
Yeah.
want to hear from, thank you so much,
Yeah.
Jenna. Aliyah, you work in one of the countries in the world that has really known more war than peace over the last 3 decades. In Kashmir, yes. Can you give us a sense of what is happening to women there? How are mother schools making a difference?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much, Kathleen, for having me here. Well, I have been born in Kashmir, and that was the time when armed insurgency broke out against India, and that was in late 1980s. So our generation has never seen peace. We have always seen violence, deaths, killings. So we really don't know what is the definition of peace, and we always wanted to know how to move ahead. Yeah. And I have heard stories from my parents of violence, and then the shift from armed violence to non-violence. But in the last 3 summers of 2008, 9, and 10, we saw a total shift, where I would like to mention a youngster named as Tufail Muttu. He was a 17 years old student. He was going for tuitions, and a pellet hit his head, and he was dead. Mm-hmm. And then we saw a new wave of violence where youngsters and women were on the forefront, pelting stones against the government forces. And then hundreds of unarmed youngsters got killed, and then they were injured, and then there were injuries, and the different thing which we saw for the first time as youngsters, like women were also on the forefront. They were frustrated. There was anger. They wanted to protect their children, and they didn't know what to do. And that's how Edith and Archana chipped in, and it was in 2012 when we started a pilot project. We met 50 families, and we did in-depth interviews, and every family had a tragedy. They had lost their sons, and the most unfortunate part was when we interacted with them, they shared their experiences that they didn't know what to do when their sons were out. They didn't know how to stop them because they have no say in the family. They don't know. They don't know that they are not the decision makers. They have low self-confidence because we live in conflict. Women are marginalized. They are subjugated. They don't have a say. Sexual violence is used, as a weapon, like in all the conflict zones. So that's how we started the Mother School, and we started our first school in the heart of the city. That was the Srinagar. It was very challenging because there was trust deficit. Women were always asking us like, why should we trust you? You can be like pro-garment, you can be anti-garment. So that was very challenging for us. And one of the overwhelming responses are like, when we finished our schools, like we started with building confidence and then the trust, how they can share their problems with each other, like being empathetic and negotiate, at least to talk to their children and have stronger networks. And that's how we're still continuing and moving forward.
Kathleen, I would just like to say that the Kashmir that we are working in is part of India. So it's not a separate country. I just want to get that fact right.
So you can see how highly politicized
so
all the discussions
we work
are.
with our part of the Kashmir, and we just had our elections, and it's a democracy which we practice there. And that is how
But
we
I think what is
access
really
it.
important, having all of you here on the podium, we work cross-border. So this is not only about mother schools and teaching mothers how to trust each other, break the barriers, learn about the developmental stages of the adolescence to see what's normal and what's already an alarming sign of early radicalization maybe. It's also about trust building among the people. Archana traveled with us across the border to Pakistan. I mean, those are arch enemies. And they created a dialogue. Many of the Pakistanis have never seen an Indian. They investigated, what food do you eat? Oh, you look like us, you know. This kind of understanding is also an amazing bridge. And the official diplomats and politicians who bravely shuttle across borders can never achieve this result because they don't reach these people. And this is the beauty of community-based, localized strategies. Or crossing the border to Kashmir, there is a border, Archana. We encountered it. Still, we have to cross the border, have to show the passports and everything. It was so important, you know, to meet the Kashmiris, met a mobilizer, an activist, a journalist as a friend, as somebody who has the same concerns, the same fears. We are all in this together. And this actually is a transnational threat. This is about all of us. It's not about distant places, Pakistan and Nigeria and Indonesia. This is about us. Every day when we switch on the radio or when we switch off the television at night, we hear about recruitment, we hear about ISIS, we hear about the lure of radical recruiters. We have to wake up. These are wake-up calls. And with the mothers, with those who are so close to the young generation, we have unique access to information. What are the signs of radicalization? They need to have this voice and need platforms within the mother schools and also local media. Social media is fine. There's a huge hype around social media. At the same time, we miss out on the potential within the communities in Mewat. One of the 7/7 bombers came from Mewat. And he did not use social media or anything there. He was exposed to radical preachings over radio, over sermons from the mosques. So we have to seize the moment and identify what potential is there within the community and use it.
Archana, you want to comment on that?
No, I just want to reiterate what Edith is saying, because when we talk about social media, we have to talk about the access that women have to social media. In the place where I work, there's only 37% literacy amongst women. So and they're not even allowed to have a phone. It's very difficult to believe, but out of that 1.2 million people, 50% are women and girls. And when they're not even allowed to use a phone, how do we reach out to them or tweet to them or Facebook with them? And especially this fear of the religious monitoring and the hawk kind of attitude which some of the clergy take on themselves, that if you do something on Facebook, then you become a target. So in this kind of environment, I think that the community radio is a very, very important tool. And this 101, one woman at a time, one step at a time, 20 women, 25 women within a community, then moving on to the next 25 and reaching out to another 75 through these 25, I think it's a step-by-step approach. And we cannot trust or depend upon this very highly hyped social media network or social media which we talk about, because where is the electricity? Where is the power? Where is the access? Would they tweet, or would they rather get water and food for their children? But they would definitely find that 1 hour, because that is their time. And I think that is what we have to change our approach to look at more traditional mediums at times to break something which is happening at a global level.
Well put.
Yeah, I would also like to bring everybody's attention towards the role of the mainstream media. On this issue, in Pakistan, we get a lot of coverage. The media gives a lot of coverage to extremism, violent extremism, all the blasts that happen. Rarely do we see it being done through a gender lens, through a women's eye, through a human perspective. It's also, I would say at times, also generic. It's about statistics, it's about diplomacy, it's about the huge picture. But how are women being impacted? What does it mean for a mother to have lost a son? What does it mean for a mother whose son has gone on a jihad? Those kind of voices hardly ever appear in the media. And Archana is also very right about creating this hype about social media. Yes, social media is the buzzword, but we must remember that in India as well as in Pakistan, in my country, 70% of the population is rural. So we can't really access them through the social media. It's only through radio most of the time that you have access to the rural population. And like Archana, we also produce radio programs. And when we did 2 programs on mothers of schools. One was a digital story and one was a radio program. And when we played it in front of the mainstream media, they were surprised and shocked. And it shocked me because they have the resources. Ours is a small little organization. They should be knowing more than we do. They should be knowing where they have to go for their stories. They should be the ones who should be coming out with more information. But it was us giving them these stories, and they said, "Oh my God, we did not know that, these schools exist, and we can move forward with these." Yeah.
And I think we can be proud of the numbers. I must, it sounds like person to person very little. Within a year, we have trained 70 trainers who reach out to these mother schools. We have so far reached between 800 and 1,000 mothers, trained mothers. Part of them will also qualify as trainers. We have really a tedious monitoring system in place. We sit in Vienna in our office where Women Without Borders is based, and I would all like to invite you. It's like a school class. Skyping is going on. We Skype with the leaders and with the mobilizers and the note takers of the mother schools. We have, I think, monthly 700 feedback reports. We have entry and exit surveys, about 1,500. Huge numbers. I think this is really something based on local initiatives which is presentable. And I really believe in this person-to-person interaction which we can scale up, where the trust is built up and where we can create a ripple effect, but based on a model which is always improved and monitored. This is so important. Nothing happens by accidents.
So let's open it up to the audience, because I think they have some questions and comments, and I'm going to ask you, I'm going to probably take 4 questions. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and your organization, if you represent one. And just put your hand up, and we have 2 roving mics. And it would be great, so we can get a lot of questions in, if you keep your comments very brief. Okay, and if I start waving, it means it's too long. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you. My name is Saf Ahmed. I'm from the Department of Defense. My question was, in any of these mother schools, are there people from opposite sides of the conflict, whether it's different religions or in case of Sri Lanka, India and Pakistan, and in Indonesia, you were saying that the district there's a lot of sectarian violence. So mothers from Sunni and Shia families, and what type of interactions do they have? And also, are there Hindu and Muslim families? Thank you.
I'm going to take another one. We have that. Thank you. Next question, is it nearby? Right here. Okay. Thank you. Okay, yeah, you decide between you who.
My name is Ernest from George Mason University. Although we're talking about how women are preventing violent extremism, but I think that we should also look at, does women contribute to the problem? Because it's not just preventing. Because if we can identify how women are also contributing, then we should be able to talk about what they are doing to also prevent even some of the problem among the women themselves. Because I come from a society whereby at times, because in quotes, some women love their children so much. Even when the children are joining bad gangs, the women don't do anything about it.
We don't understand.
Can you speak slower?
Understand the question. We're just missing out.
Maybe you pose a question.
Just the question very brief.
Okay, the
about
question is,
men.
how does women also contribute to the problem?
The men also contribute.
Okay.
How
Women.
Contribute. Okay.
perpetrators.
perpetrators.
Okay, thank you. Women as perpetrators. Thank you very much. Next question, right here. We'll just keep. Do you have any over? Okay.
Department of State, Asimali, and I have a question on, I think, like you were talking about, it's women. I think, it comes.
You're going to have to speak louder. We can't hear you up here. Yeah.
Okay. Hey, Asim Ali, Department of State, and I think if you, I want you to just talk about, the role of just man. I think, this really comes up under, educating the man, the role that women can play in, countering white extremism. And I think like you talked about, that you have been, engaged, but what sort of are you guys doing to bring
the role of
the man into this kind of this
Great.
process?
Absolutely.
how to bring men into it.
Role
think
of man.
Omar
Right
will
here
say
in the
something.
front, I believe, and that will be the last question for this round. If we have time, we'll come back again. Thank you for great questions.
Hello, my name is Tash West. I'm a student at George Washington Law School. And I'm from a state, from Utah, where we have a very prominent religion, and it discourages women from getting involved politically. And I see a lot of parallels in this particular discussion. And at our state representative, we only have about 8% of our elected officials are women, where 50% of the population is female. So we're trying to encourage more women to get involved and become educated and empowered to participate. And I'm curious if you can see how any of the programs you've instituted could also apply to some of the students.
Great question.
Great, thank you so much. All right, I'm going to bring it back, and I'm going to ask the same of you. Very brief responses, so we can maybe get this. Tasneem, go ahead.
How do we bring in people from different religions or sects or ethnicity? The schools that we initiated, one of it was with a Christian community, and I'll just repeat a quote from a mother who said that a day or two before, some people came to the church and they were asking questions about the timings of preaching and what kind of work do you do. And she said previously we would always refer these kind of people to the men of the family. But the mother schools had given them the courage and the confidence to be able to speak to these people directly. They answered the questions very politely, and then later on they referred it to the pastor. So that is the kind of impact that schools have had. We run it in all kinds of community where there are Shias and Sunnis, where there are multi-ethnic community and also multi-religious. So that is how we are bringing together different communities.
You asked about Mewat, although it's about 95% are Muslim, 92% are Muslims and 7% Hindus, but we never differentiate between the mothers. They learn, they've been living together. What we are doing is we are only trying to prevent the conflict. Of course, with the right-wing government now, we have to be more careful about tolerance and these kind of issues. But we just, when we enroll the mothers, we look at mothers who have young children, young boys particularly, and they are concerned about them. We haven't worked with any women perpetrators yet. Talking about, because it's not out there in the open, and most of us are living in this denial mode. So it's going to take time, it's a process. Talking about men, involvement of men comes automatically, as I told you, when women come. But yes, there is a lot of talk about starting the men's school, and I think Omar will respond
to one of our members.
We have our man representative here.
Omar, please introduce yourself.
My name is Omar Matar. I'm representing an organization from Zanzibar. We have been implementing the women's, the mother school very successfully, and we were hoping that probably the next stage to expand the reach of the mother school, we shall involve fathers as well, because they have a role to play in sensitizing the families and raising their children, the brothers and the sisters, Thank you.
I would love to add to the question about men. We're always asked, what about the fathers? They're part of the family setup. We would have loved to start right away with the fathers, but I must say, and you're all familiar with this, mothers are on the forefront in education, in relationship to the children. They are the emotional bond. Fathers are concerned as well, but they are more withdrawn. They fear that if something went wrong in their family, or if children are recruited or targeted or in a space of danger, that they failed to protect these children. So it's very hard to break through these masculinities. And so we have to go around and make this roundabout with the mothers. And the mothers actually are the inroad. So the fathers learn about the program. It changes the dynamics in the family, as we have heard when they come back and share the stories from the mother schools. The fathers get very interested, and this will certainly be the next step forward.
Great. Aliyah, you wanted to add?
Yes, I would like to respond to the Shia and Sunnis. Yes, we have a variety of women, and they are Shias and Sunnis. There is no class difference. We have a variety of people of urban, rural, and Shias and Sunnis. That's why we want to work with the diversity to understand the complexity of different classes.
And also break the stereotypes.
Yes.
You know, the whole effort is to not look at me as me and you as the other. It's about integration, and I think the mothers bond very quickly because the concerns are the same.
And the question concerning
I was just going to go to
the question concerning the perpetrators, we have not worked with perpetrators in the existing mother schools, but there's an exciting movement now going on. The mother schools expertise is moving west. We are bringing the mother school models to the west, relating to your question, how can we do something in Utah?
How far west can we go?
Yes, how far west can we go? Maybe.
But
what we have done in the last week, before we came here to USIP, Archana and Tasneem have been with me in Vienna, and the Austrian government in the heart of Europe has, as first government in the West, endorsed the mother school model officially. So they implement it, support it, and we hope to create a Europe-wide network of mother schools and potentially bring it to the US, where there are high concerns about recruitment.
I've been getting the signal that we have to wrap up very soon. Chik, I know you had to wanted to say something, and Archana, you wanted to respond to the question.
Yeah, in Indonesia we have a huge men network to support women's victims, especially domestic violence. We call it the New Man Network. So they know about mother school, and they inspired and they think maybe they will go to do something like parenting for fathers.
That's really encouraging.
Yes.
Thank you for.
I'd just like to respond to your question about getting more women out. You know, you all must be knowing about that film of the BBC journalist who has made. We are fighting a culture. One of the advocates or the police officer said, India has a very beautiful culture because women have no space. So, you know, we are fighting these kind of statements. But having said that, what we are doing when we work in smaller groups, we are trying to build the confidence of the women to stand up and speak out and become part of the decision-making process. And in India, we have a very strong local self-government system, which is called the Panchayati Raj. And this whole effort of working with the women and building the confidence is to enable them to stand up for these local elections, because they have a voice. It's only been suppressed. So our mother schools are helping them give a voice first at home, then within the community, and then within this whole society. And I'm very optimistic that, you know, in maybe a couple of years, we'll see more women coming up as leaders because they've learned to speak out and also learn to use the radio as a medium for the message that they want to convey. So I think that's very important, and all the countries are facing the same problem. We have only 12% or 13% women parliamentarians, and US is no different. So we are all in the same boat, and we reach out to all the women sitting here to make the difference.
On that note, I want to thank each of you for what you do every day to make a difference for the women in your lives, and clearly the leadership you share here today, the women of the world. So I hope you'll share with me in giving these women a round of grand applause.
It was very good. That's very
We're going to take a 5-minute transition. We're going to bring a new panel, and I'm going to turn the floor over to my colleague Chantal Diuma-Udrat, who will moderate the second panel. Thank you, and give us a minute. Super.
Mendo.
Your name's on.
Okay, welcome. My name is Chantal Jonge-Oudhaat. I'm a senior advisor at the USIP Center for Gender and Peacebuilding. And I have been directing the last few months the Center's project on women preventing violent extremism. The last 2 days, the two projects, the project you heard from in the first panel and this project on women preventing violent extremism, have exchanged experiences, best practices, lessons learned. And we would like to introduce you to this USIP project, which is also a pilot project that was carried out with the support of the US State Department. This particular project is really about the role of women and women's organizations in preventing violent extremism and terrorism. And it had multiple objectives that morphed also a little bit as the project evolved. In first instance, our objective was to build up the capacity of women and women's organizations in helping to prevent violent extremism, in helping them to to engage at both a community but also at a national policy level. Lastly, one of the important objectives of this project was how to engage with law enforcement and the police. I think in both countries, and not just in these two countries, but in many countries, the relationship between the police and law enforcement and certain communities are often tense. Let's put it that way. So we wanted to see to what extent women and women's organizations could play a role in helping ease tensions and increase trust. So the project was piloted in two countries, in Nigeria and in Kenya. And the panel here is really representative of those who have taken a leadership role both in Nigeria and Kenya, as well as at USIP. On the USIP side, I would like to recognize Georgia Holmer, who is now the interim director of the Center for the Rule of Law here at USIP. But Georgia started the project in Nigeria. Two other people who have really played a key role in Nigeria are Isioma Kimakolam. Isioma is a PhD candidate and also a program manager at Search for Common Ground, but has been a key pillar of this project in Nigeria. And Pastor Esther Ibanga, who is the president and founder of the Women Without Walls initiative and who is sitting next to Georgia. On the Kenyan side, I have to recognize three leaders. In the middle, Fauzia Abdi Ali. She is the chair of Sisters Without Borders, a new organization that was created actually as a result of this project, and she will tell you more about that. And she is also the chair and president of WISE Kenya, WISE standing for Women in International Security. I would like to recognize Suraya Roble Hersey, who is vice chair of Sisters Without Borders, but also a national vice chair of one of the oldest women's organizations in Kenya. And then last but certainly not least, I'd like to recognize Mariam Hussein Mohammed, who is the founder and chair of Garissa Women for Peace, and also, like Suraya, a political leader in her community, and engaged also in the private sector. So, Esther, I'd like to start with you. You know, when you began this project with Georgia and Isioma, one of the things that we were trying to do is to get women's organizations and women and the police together in one room. What was the reaction of people when you came with this idea to them, both on the side of the women and on the side of the police? I mean, had this ever been done before?
Thank you so much, Chantel. No, absolutely. It had never happened before, and there were strong reservations from both sides. The police has not had a good reputation in my state, as in most countries, basically. They are looked at with suspicion. They think they are extremely corrupt. Nobody wants to have anything to do with them. It's just a no-no when you mention the Nigerian police. And so to have Nigerian police and women as well in one place was unheard of. But what helped us was, prior to the introduction of that project, we had formed Women Without Walls initiative, and that's basically women coming from the two religions, crossing tribal and ethnic barriers and coming together to form this organization and to address the conflict issues in our state that's gone on for decades. So I think based on that background, we were ready to also now cross other lines. and the other lines are dealing with the police, which had never been heard of. So it was new, it was unique, but it was very, very educative.
Okay. Now, Isioma, tell me a little bit, what do you think, why did this work so well? There was a lot of initially sort of distrust between the community on the one hand and the police on the other, and we've talked about trust in the previous panel as well. So what made it work, you think, getting these two different communities together and actually dialoguing?
Thank you, Chantal. Yeah, just like Esther said, yes, before the introduction of the project, the police was at the other side, the community was at the other side. But what really made it work was the timing. And then secondly, everybody suddenly realized that we are all at risk. If a bomb is set off here, the bomb is not selective in destruction. It kills everybody, whether you're a Muslim, Christian, man, woman. So there was this concern for personal security. The law enforcement officials on their own parts, they appear to be overwhelmed by the issues on ground as well. Every little argument, leads to violence, So the timing was really, really very right. And then the political contest at the same time, it would appear as if the state was reluctant or was not really doing enough. And then people also began to understand that hard security, or countering violence using hard security wasn't just really enough, but that people really need to begin to talk with one another. And then also what made it work was also at that particular time as well, because of similar lack of presence of the state and the community, a lot of communities already began to adopt the avoid the state syndrome. They began to form their own security outfit, what we call vigilante. They began to form different communal, even the women began to take part in that. So everybody saw the need for that particular platform where they can actually engage with themselves.
Thank you. Georgia, you came in there really as an observer and an outside party. And what did you see as sort of the main challenges, and what do you think are the main lessons that we can learn from the community and the engagement with the police?
Sure. So I want to add to the list of what made it successful that Isioma started, because I think what Esther just alluded to in terms of the interfaith relationship building skills that the women brought to these dialogues was really crucial. I think we stumbled upon a really special recipe that by working with key women leaders who already had a robust skill set in building relationships and working across bridges, working in difficult circumstances, building relationships, it gave them an edge in engaging with the police in a way that had they been in a more sectoral space, they wouldn't have been as successful. On the other hand, on the police side, I think we were very lucky because we were able to identify some very key change agents. And there were a couple of police, particularly on the divisional level, who had a very unique combination of humility, commitment to service, and influence. Each of those elements on their own doesn't quite get you there, but they were willing to be very open and humble and honest about the challenges that the police face. And I think that in humanizing the police and talking about the fact that they had to sew their own uniforms and dip into their own purses for evidentiary collection units and things like that, it made them accessible and it made the dialogues possible because the police became human beings to these women.
Fozia, I think that is also a theme that came up in Kenya, is sort of better understanding the police. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, this was also very evident in Kenya. And before I jump into that, I also wanted to say, for us, the way we even started was also very critical. The entry points within these communities. We brought together 12 different organizations, 12 different women who are already active within their communities. So we started building trust from even the 12 women we were engaging with, so that they could be able to learn from one another, to even have this sense that they're not alone in this. They can be able to even talk to each other from different regions of the country. So we had those coming from Nairobi, those coming from Garissa, and those coming from the coast, in particular Mombasa. Now, when it came to the issues of engaging with the police, there was the space for dialogue. The police really wanted to engage, but they did not know how to come and have conversations with the community. For instance, in a place like Eastleigh in Nairobi, we had just had what we call Operation Sanitization of Eastleigh. This was immediately after the Westgate incident. So the community in itself was feeling a little bit targeted, feeling a sense of marginalization. Why is it whenever something happens, this is the first point where the police intervene? So what we did is to ensure we take that into consideration even when we are planning our dialogues. So we opted for a methodology that would be inclusive, a methodology that would allow for everyone on board to speak out. So we started off by separating the two groups. We had a dialogue with the police, found out how they want to engage within the community, what are some of the issues they wanted to raise, their own perception of that particular community. And then we also spoke to the community at large, brought in women, private sector, because Eastleigh in particular is one of the areas that we have quite a number of businesses. And then also brought in religious leaders within the same dialogue, and then started having to break down the different walls that they had already put up. And then later then brought the two groups together and opened up that space for better engagement. And in the entire time, what we decided to do is put through a theme which is called Fungua Roho in Kiswahili, which means open your hearts. So open up and find that this is a safe space for you to talk and share. Because at the end of the day, nobody will arrest you just by sharing at that point.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's a lot about understanding the other. Again, a theme that came up in the first panel. I think one of the things to stress too in the Kenya situation is that you had these 12 organizations who actually didn't know each other and had no contact with each other. And I think the other thing that you're stressing that is interesting to note is that in a pilot project, you can actually have some flexibility to adapt according to the situation. I think in both Nigeria and Kenya, we have a lot of commonalities, but there are also particularities. Within countries, that is true for Nigeria and Kaduna and Jos, as well as in Kenya. Let me change a little bit of tack. And Surya, you are a vice chair of one of the oldest women's organizations in Kenya. You have been very active in the women's organizations. You told me you've been actually in Beijing in 1995. So why do you think women's organizations are really necessary to bring to the table when we're talking about preventing violent extremism?
Thank you very much. I would like to appreciate for being here this morning. That is interesting. Especially in Kenya, I think the women movement has really been on the ground for quite a long time. One thing we need to appreciate is that I think in many countries, women have really had to fight for space. And as much as we are told there's an opportunity, nobody gives it to you. You have to actually fight for that space. When it comes to violent extremism, we've realized that we cannot win this war without engaging the women. And especially when you talk about security. And the women being in the lead in terms of security matters, we don't have space there, especially when it comes to decision making. So as women organizations, we thought that it was important for us to engage the government to look for space at the policy level. Because where decisions are made, women are not there. And we've come to realize that if women are gatekeepers, and if you need to win a war in security, then women have to be put in the forefront. So as women organizations, we said we are looking for space in the policy-making organs. We are lobbying our government at the national level so that we can be able to be sitting on the table. And then we've realized also we need also to engage the community and let the women get involved in their own community security matters. And we thought that if we don't have those women who are also supposed to be the mothers, we've heard that women are also perpetrators, women are sympathizers, women are victims, women are everything. They are mentors. They're supposed to be, even be mediators in their own conflict. So as women organizations, we've tried to look for space. And I want to say, I think after 20 years, I think this time round, we are celebrating 20 plus years, we've not moved much, but we are very optimistic that at least the government is recognizing the importance of having women in leadership positions, and especially in security matters. Because I keep telling people at the community level, if I ask the audience here today, how many people slept in their houses, the women will tell me the people who slept in their houses. Most of the time, the men know who slept in their bedrooms. And it's very important that we have to engage the women. They will tell you what's happening in the community. They will tell you who walked in and who walked out. And they will tell you what are people talking about. But as my colleagues are saying, there has to be a good relationship. The biggest challenge we've had at the Kenyan coast, I come in from a community that is predominant Muslim, and as you know that Muslim women have never had a voice, unfortunately. And this is because they are not empowered. And this is because of cultural, religious issues. And as leaders, we are challenged because we speak for the rest of the women who are out there. And we are trying to make sure that the women are heard. The women need to speak up. Within Sisters Without Borders, we've also had a support project. And the biggest achievement we've had is to have these women who have had their sons, who have been recruited into Al-Shabaab, come out and speak up openly. There's been a lot of fear that if the women speak, then they'll be targeted by the security enforcers. Some of them have not even reported that their sons are missing. But because of this, we've sat them down, we've created this trust, we've told them if they don't report, in Kenya, within 7 years, that is when you can be able to get a death certificate. And if you don't come out to speak about it, then nobody is going to help you. So for us, I think it's been a challenge. We've put women in those positions so that they can speak up for themselves. As women's organizations, we are creating this peace, and I think we've managed to achieve something.
Okay, thank you. I want to turn to you, Mariam, because I think something that is very interesting that happened both, I think, in Nigeria as well as in Kenya, is to bring in the private sector in this effort, this long-lasting effort, I think, to prevent violent extremism. We often here in Washington, D.C. talk about, we should bring in the private sector, but we actually have little clue of how to do that. How did you do that, Mariam? How did you bring in the private sector to this discussion?
Thank you, Chantal. Good morning.
Good morning.
First and foremost, Garissa is, I come from a region called Garissa, northern Kenya, which I think has dominated the news over the Christmas, where people were killed in buses, non-Muslims, as they call them. But they are our brothers, we call them Kenyans. In Kenya, we have a slogan called "We are one." There is no problem of religion. And we felt that as fighting violent extremism, we have to bring everybody on board. And as such, we actually don't need to wait for either donor funding or money from anywhere. And so you have to go to somebody and say, Chantal, I want to talk to so-and-so, so can you buy me tea? Or can you give me a hall? So that I can make these people meet and talk together. So we managed to talk to different actors in the field and bring them together and talk about it. This is because the town has been crying for a very long time that people were being targeted and maybe in quotes, non-Muslims were being killed, and so the whole town was crying for peace, peace, peace. And so everybody was ready to offer whatever they have to get the peace that is outside there. And the solution was with us. So how do we bring all these people together and come together and talk? And so we involved the private sector, and we felt we should talk to the community, business people, parastatals, non-governmental organizations who have money, or they have the meeting hall as we are sitting here. So somebody offers the little money that we will buy the tea for people, and the other person offers the hall where we are going to meet, and another person buys a bottle of water for the participants who are coming to talk together. And we brought everybody on board and we were talking. And over the Christmas, there was supposed to be, we got the information that there was supposed to be an attack, and so we actually called the security, the clergy and the community together so that we can be on the alert so that we can avert that attack that was going to happen. So this is not me, this is not you, and this is something that we are all in. Extremism has no boundary, it has no color, it doesn't know any religion, it can attack anybody anytime, so we have to be all on board.
I think that concern of the community came out also very strongly in Nigeria, Esther and Isioma, and you have also managed to really bring the community together and different stakeholders, including the private sector, right?
Yes, absolutely. Let me talk about the first community we had that meeting. It's in the Jos North local government area, which has been a volatile flashpoint of previous conflicts. The first time we did, we invited all the stakeholders, and to our shock, we were expecting like 50 people, and on that day, there were about 140 people that showed up in the hall. The local government chairman was there, the police commissioner was there, traditional religious leaders were there, the youths were there, the women were there. Every segment of the community was represented there. And it was amazing because this is the first time ever that the police would actually engage the community. So we had some ground rules, and the first being that say anything you want, there will be no arrest, and won't come after you later, you know? And that opened up. People had so many things to say. 4 hours after they wanted to go on, we had to close the meeting. And for the first time, the police heard, you know, the community tell them what they feel about them. And they had an opportunity to not only defend themselves, but to also say what the police felt about the community. And they told the community that you are the ones that hide the criminals. Some of these Boko Haram people come and stay in your community and you don't report it. You know, so it was really, really amazing. And the second community, we had that dialogue. There's been a conflict between the herdsmen and the local farmers in that community. And I remember clearly the head of the Fulani herdsmen is referred to as the Ardo, like the chief. And I remember he got up that day and he made a statement and he said, quite obviously, the women have been able to achieve what women have been struggling to achieve all these years. That they actually brought us together to sit down and talk. And he said the women should be commended. And because the women are bringing us, and he said the women are our mothers. When they speak, we have to listen. And then he turned to me. I didn't even know. I've had a radio program in my state for like 14 years called Home Front, and it's just building the family unit. And this man who lives in the bush that day told me, he said, so you are the Mrs. Ibanga. He said, for the past years, I've been listening to you on the radio. And I'm so happy to be part of this, and I promise you will do all that is within our power to make sure there's peace here. So, I mean, the results have been just amazing.
Yeah, I think what comes out here is that if we really want to be effective in preventing violent extremism, we have to intervene at all different levels of society, from the family to the community to the national level and the international level. And in Kenya, there was also very interesting engagement with the women members of parliament. Can you very briefly talk about that, maybe Fuzia, and then we'll open it up for some questions, and we'll come back to you.
Yeah, so as even Soraya alluded to, engaging at different levels is very important. On the economic front as well, in particular the private sector, when there's a terror attack, it affects businesses. We have seen this even at the coast where Soraya comes from. Tourism has been affected. When the economy is affected, it goes all the way down to the household level. So one of the key things we did is we wrote a letter to the Kenya Women Parliamentarian Association and requested for 3 things in particular. One is to look at the economic aspect, and this is not the traditional economic aspects that most people would put across, that is we need jobs or work for women. But we're looking at it from the point of we need to have their voices to advocate for change and to advocate for better security so that it can even improve the national economy as well, because that way it still trickles down to the household level. Secondly is to look at the issues of police conditions. We are going through a lot of reforms in the country. The reforms are targeting the institutions, including police institutions. But one of the key things that kept coming out in the discussions, in the dialogues we are having with the women and the community at large is how do we provide the police officers with better housing conditions. We are asking them to be the people who even assist us in our security, but we are not looking at their basic human rights, their basic conditions of working. So we were looking at them to even support us in championing the plight of the police person. Thirdly is to look at the element of education. Where Mariam comes from, teachers refused to go back after the Mandela incident. And I think you've been seeing this maybe in the media. They have refused to go back. It's also going to increase what we feel could be religious tensions. It could also increase diversity, like polarize the situation and bring in more issues to do with ethnic divides. So we were pushing for more voices coming from Parliament to push for educators to go back and educate the young boys and girls back in northern Kenya. So those were the three key things we were pushing for.
Okay, I want to turn it over to the audience, and I'm giving my micro so that you can actually engage with the women here on the podium. I'm going to stand here. So let's do like before. We'll take a group of 3-4 questions, comments. Keep it brief, and if you go on too long, I'll do like Kathleen, like this. Please, the gentleman here in the orange sweater in the front.
Hi, Nicholas Deming, consultant, gender enthusiast. My question for you is about the coordination between different organizations. If we come at it from the perspective of a two-step process, you have to get women to the table before they can engage in countering violent extremism. So what are the challenges you face so that you can organize and coordinate your effort to get more women at the table rather than waiting for an incident to happen, such as we saw in the last group with the documentary Daughter of India, or India's Daughter, where the women's community came out in force and organized quickly. What are those challenges that you face in coordinating with your sister organizations?
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Snigdha Deval. I'm from George Mason University. It's really great to hear all the support that you're getting from the community when you try to organize these kinds of dialogue. But my question was, what kind of resistance and challenges do you face? Like, have there ever been incidents of backlash or of either extremist organizations or even vested local interests trying to shut down these kind of dialogues? And if at all, yes, how have you been able to surpass or deal with them?
Okay. The woman here in the middle, in black and white. Okay. And then, yes.
Hello, my name is Brittany Parcells with the Department of State. You mentioned these 12 organizations in Kenya had no knowledge of each other, had no contact before this program with the police, and I'm wondering if those organizations have continued to collaborate in any other respect. Have they worked on any other projects together now that they have been put in contact?
Okay, thank you. Please.
Hi, my name is Alashna Abimiku from the University of Maryland. And I really want to commend the panel on what you've done. It's really incredible. So by involving the police, I assume that you automatically involve the men, because my recollection of the police is that they're mostly men, but I don't know whether the police you're working with are women. And I sincerely believe that part of the success you've had is because you've worked with the community at the grassroots. And I just wanted to know whether this has filtered up and how much support you've gotten from higher level individuals. From my Kenyan colleagues, one of the things you mentioned is that the women were not literate, and I just wondered whether you're improving on that and encouraging them to, because that's liberation, I believe.
Okay. Isioma, do you want to take a step at actually the last question in terms of the police and the involvement of men?
Yes.
And if not, if you want to think about it for a minute, that's fine. I think our Kenyan colleagues, there's the question about the coordination between these different organizations, what made that successful?
Okay, let me just take the one of the police. Like you rightly alluded, a majority of them are men, but that is actually changing now in the Nigerian police force. We also worked with women police officers. Some of the officers that were part of the project, we had about 4 women in the project,
We had six women police officers.
Six women police officers. So it wasn't just, but yes, you are right. We also had men in it. So why were we able to bring them together, irrespective of their differences, and what were the challenges that we faced? The first challenge was trying to even get the women, somebody like Esther, to even want to sit with the police. Because before now, like every other place, what they all understand about the police is that police is bad, the police is not your friend, they do this, they do that. And then for the police as well, they didn't also feel very comfortable, sitting with the community because they felt that they were cooperative and all. So the first step we took was to train the women, discuss with them first, and then of course we went ahead all the way down to the history of policing in Nigeria, and then down to the human aspect of it, and then the same thing with the police. Then before we brought them together. So at this time we had set the stage. They kind of have pre-knowledge of, what the communities face, and as well the women also now have an understanding, appreciable understanding of what the police officers were going through. So when they came together, they came from that knowledge of background. So it was really easy to break that mistrust between them. So that was what actually led to how we break that challenge.
Okay. Who of my Kenyan sisters want to talk about Sisters Without Borders and how that came about?
Okay, I'll take it up. I wanted to even share a particular story, listening to the question about working with police. When we were first engaging with the women, what was very interesting to me was there was a statement where one woman said when she meets a thug and she meets a police officer, she runs. So in other words, they were equal in her eyes. But at the end of the dialogues and engaging together with the police, her perception changed. And she said, now I think I can be able to approach this police officer. And he even shared his cell phone number and said, you can call me at any time, which I thought was really an interesting change of perception within just one dialogue session. There was the question of whether or not we continue to collaborate between the 12. So at the end of engaging for a period of almost 7 months at the beginning, and then forming what we now call the Sisters Without Borders, which is a month old, we have completely continued to collaborate. What is interesting is because every member of that group is passionate to bring change within the communities that they serve, they put in their time, which is the most expensive thing. We do not wait to be provided with any form of financing, and in this particular case, in the form of funds coming from development partners. We actually utilize our time, our efforts, our networks, including different associations that we are within. For instance, Suraya is actually the president of Rotary Club, so getting the Rotarians also to get involved. So the borderline is always, we want to ensure that it's a multifaceted approach. We want everyone to be involved within the community. So we continue to collaborate up to now.
Okay, on the issue of the challenges in coordinating women organizations, there's been a perception that women are their own worst enemies. Mm-hmm. And I think men take advantage of that, with all due respect. And the challenge we've had is women pulling different directions. And for a long time, everybody seems to be having their own interest. But women have gone back to the drawing board and discovered that they actually they all have similar problems. They needed to identify a common agenda. We could be talking about peace, somebody else is talking about education. One thing we have to realize that you cannot solve the world. You cannot solve the problems of this world. You need to be very specific to know what are you actually trying to look at. So we have issues of building trust, and then the issues of trying to bring all our interests together to find out what is our priority here. Another challenge that we have is to sustainability. But the fact that most organizations are also donor funded, it brings a very big problem. Programs are short term. You end up having a project, even before you realize you've done with your pilot, you've not really gone to the real issues of trying to find out what is the impact. So it has been a big problem, but right now women have come together. We have identified a common agenda. We have come to trust each other. Somebody has to lead the way. We cannot all be leaders. We've also looked at the issues of sustainability, that we really don't have to wait for donor funding. There are some of these things that can be done within our own communities. And believe you me, we have a lot of private sectors who are willing to support as long as they are approached. And you need to tell them what is the end result. So for sure, women have come together and they're now speaking in one voice. On issues of education, our government has had a deliberate move to come up with affirmative action, to be able to make sure that there's space for women. Whatever, in every scope of development, there has to be space where women are represented. So women can have education, unfortunately, but not all women who have education are also empowered to speak up for other women. That's another challenge we have. And we've even spoke about the parliamentarians. Not all women parliamentarians go to parliament to have the agendas for women. That's another challenge we have. So as women leaders, we really have to speak up. We have to get even the men who are passionate about the women issues. We can actually use them as role models and as mentors who can speak up and champion for the rights. So I think we've had those challenges, and we appreciate that we have the challenges, but at least there's light at the end of the tunnel, and we tend to also look at the mentors, people who can come up and say, now we are here trying to mentor some of the women whom we have behind.
Okay, thank you. I think we want to go back. You had just a two-finger intervention, Georgia?
A real short one, and then may I go ahead? So, in response to your question about how do we bring together women from diverse organizations and have a common agenda before we met with the police, I think there was a really interesting group dynamic that happened in which the women, some of whom had never met each other before, were able to connect over their common grievances against the police. So when we met exclusively with the women before we actually met with the police, I think they were united by the fact that they all had issues with engaging with the police. So there's sort of an irony to this, because then the next step then was to bring them to the point of willingness to engage with the police.
Yeah, and having a very clear focus. Let's go back and then we'll come back to you. Back to the audience. Up in the back, woman with black and white sweater.
Good morning. My name is Marcia. I'm working with Feminist Majority Foundation. And I would like to know how in your countries, how your relationship is with community leaders and religious leaders. For example, in Afghanistan, many people, they don't go to the police when something happens. They have jirga, like shura, and they get together with community leaders and elders in the community, and sometimes the religious leaders like mullahs, and they solve the problem. And the second question is, how is your relationship with the government? In Afghanistan, we have a problem. Our constitution gives a lot of rights to the women, but it's not enforced. And we came up with Violence Against Women Act, but some conservatives in our parliament refused to pass it. So I would like to know how, like, if you have suggestions and if you came up through a problem and how you solved it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other? Here, a woman in the reddish Bordeaux color shawl.
Sounds like a great sketch. I don't know if this is appropriate, but the moderator mentioned that in this country there's a problem, or there's thought being given to how to engage in civic, to get the civilian side involved in a similar manner that you all are doing such great work. And I just would love to hear some of your perspectives on what you think that could happen in this country.
Thank you. Any other at the, yeah, there?
Hello, my name is Diana Sokeng and I'm a Cameroonian student from Georgetown University. I'd like to ask if anyone has any recommendations for neighboring countries like Chad or Cameroon on how to engage with the police to prevent extremism on their side of the border. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to the panel. Maybe Mariam, you want to start off and...
Yes, there is a question about the religious leaders and community leaders and how we are engaging with them and the government relationship. First and foremost, before we started this work, we were peace workers on the ground. Like my organization, Garissa Women for Peace, is in existence for the last 12 years. And we have been working with the government, countering peace issues. And as you know, Garissa is about 105 kilometers from the Somali border. And we have been working on peace all through, with the help of the government and with the help of the community leaders. And my community is 95% Muslims. So without the support of the main leaders and the religious leaders, we could not have gone the far we have gone. So we had to bring the men on board, and as you all know, Muslims hear a lot of clergy's words from the mosques. So we had to bring the religious leaders, the community leaders, the government together to talk about peace and support the community to bring peace into the community. So right now, as we speak, talking about extremist violence, is we are bringing the clergy, the community, and the government together so that we can form a network of, networking with the community, so that there is exchange of information from both sides, both from the government, from the clergy, and from the government.
Esther, I think you wanted to say something about this as well, but before you do, I think one thing to emphasize is this project really start from the premise that we have to find ways to constructively engage with different communities and different actors in society.
Well, before this project in our own state, what we did was strong advocacy to all the religious leaders in the city, both Christian and Muslim. We went to them as Women Without Walls initiative, introduced ourselves to them and told them what we're doing and asked for their support, and we got it from the chief imam, and we also got it from the chairman of the Christian Association of Nigeria. So, they were really even excited that we are coming out to carry out a project like that. So that really, really helped us. In terms of engaging the government, we have not been too successful with the state government. But what we have done, because we work at grassroots level, we go into the community, there are some communities that we have access to that the government dares not even go there because of the animosity between the people and the state government. So what we have done is to address the almost play like a mediating role between the government and the community, and then write a formal report to the government on, listen, we've gone to this community, we've engaged them, and this is what we have found out, and this is how we think you can come in to address their grievances. So we're also doing research along with our advocacies and then telling the government how, well, sometimes they don't answer us, but we have seen slight changes that they have actually implemented some of our recommendations.
Right. In terms of, how, do you have any lessons for the neighbors? I know in Kenya, the reason this new consortium of CVE organizations was called Sisters Without Borders is because you very much had the region in mind. Isn't that true?
Yes. As Mariam has said, we have Somalia that is a neighborhood, we have Ethiopia, we have Tanzania, we have Sudan. So So the intention is to take forward most of the good practices that are coming from engaging with women at the community level, engaging with women even at the middle and higher levels, and then replicate that as well within the other countries.
Isioma?
Yeah, I would just like to answer your question, how can other countries, especially neighboring countries, Cameroon, Chad, Niger, talking about Nigeria and neighbors, how can they also engage the police to prevent this from coming to them? The first thing is need. First, is there a need for them to even do that? And the answer is yes, because as we can see the growing trend of terrorism, nobody ever thought that it would come to Nigeria and even grow up to this scale. So yes, there is a need. Then if there is a need, what will be the entry points? The entry point, the first thing will be to find out where are those, or which of these communities or states are most vulnerable. And of course, you begin to look at, up north there, neighbors with, like we have in the forest close to Sambisa, we have in Chad, we have in Java. So those communities, those are vulnerable communities that somebody may want to begin to pilot such projects. And then when you find an entry point, you now begin to look at who are the best people you want to use. In the community, who do you want to use? Among the government, what government champions do you want to select and who do you want to use? And then you begin to look at those who already have good reputation. Those also who does not have any interest. By interest, I mean whether political or economic interest. Because one thing we also have learned, one of the lessons we have learned from our engagement in Jos and Kaduna in Nigeria is that when an intervention like this comes, if it's initiated by an outsider who does not have any interest at all, it seems to accelerate faster and yield more results than when they begin to perceive that you have, interest there. So that's will really help. Thank you.
We have time for one or two comments or questions from the audience. Yes, the gentleman here.
Khaldun Kuba, project officer at the Iraq Foundation. It was interesting to know about the intervention that you have done in how you engaged different sectors of the community, but I'm interested to learn more about engaging the victimized women themselves and providing feedback on how this issue could be addressed.
Okay. Another question or comment? Alison?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alison Peters. I work for the Institute for Inclusive Security. We're focused on advancing women's inclusion directly in security processes to counter violent extremism. So you talked a bit about some of the women police that you engage with in this project, and I'm hoping you might be able to expand a bit on that and talk about what impact, if at all, do you see women's direct recruitment in the police having on efforts to counter violent extremism in your communities?
Okay, thank you very much. I think that last question is actually a very good comment. I think we do need more women police in the forces, be it in Nigeria, Kenya, or the United States or elsewhere. I'd like to turn it to the panel, and while you're responding to some of the questions, I also want to ask you, if there's one message you want to leave this audience with, what message is that? What is the single most important thing that you have learned and experienced while doing this project? And maybe we start with Esther and then go down the way through Miriam. Esther, please.
Okay, I'd like to say, leaving the message and copying the theme for this year's International Women's Day is make it happen. I'd like to also reiterate that we can make it happen. And I also say that we all have something at stake. And if we look at the future, of what we want our countries or our people to look like, then we have a responsibility to contribute our own quota. We can make it happen. We must overcome fear and intimidation and the walls that are put in front of us. We can make it happen.
Great. Georgia?
I think my own personal observation from the project in Nigeria is that how critical the role of empathy was in this entire process. in humanizing the police, in the women coming together with their common agendas, in understanding the realities of who's at risk of radicalization and why, that it's something that actually can occur within one's own family, within one's own community. And I think that that was a really critical component of our discussions.
Thank you. Isioma?
Yeah, for me, if I would like to leave any message, is to say that there is need for us to continue to engage the government and the police with the community. It is very, very important because most of these things start from the community level. So community policing and community engagement with the police is very vital. Thank you.
Fozia?
Yeah, for me, I'll take it from a point of event programming. I think we've done enough pilots when it comes to issues to do with preventing violent extremism, and I think it's time we start implementing some of the good practices we are learning from different countries. As you see on board, we have very many countries, we have done so many things on the ground, and there are good things that are happening on the ground. But sometimes we still come back and say we are piloting something else. Why not leverage on already the things that are doing good on the ground and continue with those lessons forward?
First of all, allow me to respond to a question on the women victims. I think somebody asked about what are we doing towards them. There's the issue, we have a project at the coast in Mombasa where we've brought these women together to give them social psycho support. And we realized some of these sons who have gone were actually the breadwinners in these homes. So we are also looking at interventions of economic empowerment. We are also looking at a network where women can exchange their stories. They need to realize that everybody has a story to tell and they are not going to suffer on their own. We are also supporting them to have an intervention with the government because we have some of these sons who are coming back, but the government does not have a program that can have them reintegrated back to the society. So we need to protect them, to let them know that we can bring them back so that they can be able to be rectified and they can be able to come back to the society. What I want to say today is it's very essential to work with women in preventing violent extremism. And this is because women know the community more than anybody else. The women can actually detect some of these issues, some of the early signs of radicalizations within their family setup, within their sons. I keep saying that change is gradual. It does not happen overnight. When you see your son is changing in character, it's something you can detect if you're an observant mother. So we are trying to engage these women so that they can see these things early to be able to have proper interventions. Women are also household social scientists. They run these homes and they can actually be a solution to some of the security problems we have. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least, Mariam, what's your message?
Okay, my message to the audience and to everybody: extremism has no boundary. It has no religion. It can penetrate anywhere, and it can catch you anywhere. Wherever you are, you can't protect yourself against extremism. So please, let's be on the watch out. Mothers are the best people to be used to understand the changing trend of any behavior, be it the girlfriend, be it the wife, the sister, whoever you are. As a woman, you can understand the behavior of the extremist, of the person who is going towards extremism. So please, let's be on the lookout as we protect ourselves and the innocent lives that are outside. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think, somebody in the audience asked, what can we learn from you? I think there's a lot of things that we can learn from these courageous women here on this panel as well as on the previous panel. They're actually putting their lives on the line every day, every minute, and yet they will continue the fight. And I think one of the things that shows is where there is a will, there is a way, and there is a very clear call to action. And with that, I would say, please join me in thanking the women of this panel and the previous.
Thank you, Chantal. And I also want to express my sincere appreciation To each of the participants who have been a part of this 3-day symposium, you've come a long way and you've enriched our story, you've enriched our understanding, and we do hope to make this move forward, make it happen, yes. You've been terrific partners, and you do exemplify courage, dignity, and resilience in all that you do. I just want to take a moment to thank a few people here. I want to thank our partner, Dr. Edith Schlaffer, and her partner, Georgina Nietzsche of Women Without Borders, for your steadfast work, commitment to do more with women in civil society in so many countries, and truly women without borders. I also want to thank my USIP colleagues. This has been going on for about 3 years, and their time and commitment is really what has made these projects move forward here in headquarters. I want to recognize Georgia Holmer, our colleague Linda Bishai, who couldn't be with us today, Susan Hayward, Colette Rausch, Steve Steiner, and David Smock. I want to call out my colleague and tell her how much I appreciate the inspiration and collaboration. Chantal, that was a fabulous panel that you moderated. Thank you. And last but not least, you can't imagine what the last 3 days have been like between the snow and everything else. And really, the thanks for making this happen. And I really want you to stand up, all three of you. One is standing. Danielle Robertson, Nicoletta Barbera, and Megan Loney, thank you very much. For months of preparing for this. So as we bring this to a close, I do want to draw your attention to the action kit that you may have picked up on the way in here this morning. The designer, Miriam Miklas, raise your hand, who did this. Is this beautiful? Thank you very much. This is really a work in progress. We call it an action kit. We didn't want to call it a toolkit. It's for action. It is thinking about this nexus of why gender matters. We want your thoughts on it. We want your actions. And please keep visiting usip.org, Gender and Peace Building, over the next few months, because more additional components of this action kit will be added. We'd love your feedback. Find us again at gender@usip.org. Thank you for coming. Happy International Women's Day to all the women and to all the men who have mothers, sisters, daughters. Thank you very much. Have a great day.